Good afternoon, members. Thank you very much for your patience in coming back there. We now begin part 2 of the budget debate. I have a point of clarification from Bailey.
Thank you very much, Provost. During the lunch break and the recess, I grew concerned that maybe Councillor Lane wouldn't have time to eat lunch because he spent so much time shuttling between the groups, and therefore wondered whether he had any statement to make about a revision to his motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bailey. Mr. Leader, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I think it would be most helpful if I could adjust my budget motion, please.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to talk to that?
First of all, I'll thank Bailey for his concern about my dietary requirements over lunch. Yeah, as I said this morning, I look forward to listening to parts of the debate today, and we look forward to taking forward some proposals from across the chamber that will benefit the people of Perth and Kinross. So I have listened carefully today, but also I've listened in the weeks and days coming prior to this day, and there's been a lot of common ground between all the political groups, which is heartening because I think everyone in here wants to do the best they can for the community. I think we all want to get to the same end point, but we've maybe just got different ideas of how we get to that end point. So I'd like to thank all the elected members and their group leaders, etc., for engaging. So in discussions with the independent group, and also all of these things fall into what we want to do as an administration, so thanks for bringing them to our attention. In line with my administration's aspirations of increasing community usage of our schools and community campuses, I'm providing 24k recurring funding to reduce the income targets for the hire purchase within community campuses, and a new budget of 50k recurring to support adapting schools and community campuses to help facilitate increased community access whilst the school may be being used for educational purposes. We will take off the rejection of the 52k recurring reduction to devolved school management small school supply contingency budget. I will reinstate the recurring grant funding of 23k in each of the years 24, 25, 25, 26 and 26, 27 for Pitlochry Festival Theatre. I will provide 60k recurring available to Live Active Leisure to maintain provision within Pitlochry, initially in Live Active Leisure, in Live Active Athol, and then to ensure it continues until the new community campus model in Pitlochry is completed. In recognition of ongoing regeneration efforts within CREEF, I am committing non-recurring grant funding of 40k in each of the years 24, 25, 25, 26, 26, 27 to CREEF Community Trust. In line with our aspiration to support small rural businesses, we will provide 1k recurring funding to exempt farmers markets from road closure charges. And to allow for further engagement with communities, I will provide 30k non-recurring to Live Active Leisure to keep community halls open for a further year to allow time to facilitate community asset transfer requests by local groups. And finally, in recognition of the significant work that Growbus does to support rural businesses, I will make our funding for 24 to 25 and make it recurring funding of £100,000. For the Scottish Labour Group, this is interesting that it comes forward today, and I think it adds impetus to the announcement yesterday of Stagecoach and the dramatic reduction to non-subsidised services. So I'm very happy to support the suggestion. So in line with our significant support for public transport, I'm happy to provide 115k in year 1, 105k in year 2 and 105k in year 3 for the Buses 2030 proposal, which is funding for the development of a fully costed business case for a public interest or public owned bus operator to transfer local public transport. I'm also happy to support 35k towards Tulloch Play facilities, which I think is matched funding elsewhere, and also as part of our ongoing commitment to reduce food waste, I will provide a 13k non-recurring grant to Letham for All for their community fridge. Again, this is something that I think all of the members across the chamber will agree that we have to continue to move forward. So I'm willing to happy to provide an additional 50k non-recurring to support the feasibility of community transport and community transport itself. Again, with being within the, as I said earlier, nobody has the monopoly of good ideas or to point out omissions within my SNP administration budget. So I'm very happy to add from the Conservative group the £20,000 for quiet spaces that was suggested in their budget. And also, after speaking to other elected members as well, it was pointed out that that we had we had missed, I'll say, that we're not committing towards community mental health support groups, and that was pointed out to me by Councillor Duff. And so I'm happy to put in £60,000 towards that subject. And other groups all have spoken to me about £20,000 for parent councils non-recurring, which was not in our budget, and I'm happy to include that in my new motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leader. Are there any requests for comment from members? And if there are no requests for comment, it's going to be a very short debate because I'll just go to Bailey to start the summing up. Councillor John Rebeck, please.
Thank you, Convener. First of all, I would like to add my thanks to all the officers that have been involved with the budget process, particularly as I'm a first-time involvee in the process. I'm fairly sure some of my questions were occasionally daft, but frequently annoying, as they were more of a rant than a question, I think, most of the time. I'm going to try not to do any politics here today, actually. And the reason for that is I bumped into an old friend in the High Street last week who I haven't seen for a while. He works for the council, enjoys working with the council, and does a good job for the council. He was told his job is at risk on the eve of the papers going public. And what was really unsettling for me, actually, is he felt as sorry for me being at the centre of the decision-making process and having to make some difficult decisions, as I did for him being affected by them. And it reminded me, and I know I'm kind of teaching all elected members here how to suck eggs, but it did remind me that the decisions we make here today have a real impact on the people we are here to serve, whether they're employees of the council or whether they are citizens affected by the decisions we make on the services we deliver for them. In terms of the budget, I think we in administration and as a group in Learning and Families understand that education and its associated services are required to change and transform to reflect changing needs, guidance and indeed legislation. We shall seek to do this in a mature, sensible and considered manner in order that we can continue to deliver services in the best way possible and which meet the needs of our children and young people in Perth and Kinross. And supporting our young learners with additional support need or who have experienced adverse childhood experiences will remain a priority. I'm also aware that a Raising Attainment Strategy paper is coming to Learning and Families shortly, and despite the challenges we are seeing, the paper will show good progress in many key areas. However, we also know that there are areas that we need to and must improve on, and we're not shy in where that needs to be done. There are also some really good and positive things to speak about here. An extra £500,000 invested in the Financial and Security Fund is vital in assisting our genuinely wonderful revenue and benefits teams led by Nicola and Lynn, who are at the front line in protecting our most vulnerable in their time of greatest need, but also in signposting people to their entitlements and therefore hopefully to a slightly less precarious financial position. And we all know that stress in family situations can impact on a young person's ability to focus and learn. So it's really important. And we want to support the new position of Promise Improvement Lead and making sure that the post is funded for at least 2 years. The attainment gap is largest for our care experienced young people, and we need to continue to address this inequality. Having this dedicated resource, a person to advocate for care experienced young people in the ways that other parents and carers do for their children and young people, will help us in this endeavour. Councillor Shires is absolutely right in her role as convener to support and champion the ambitions of the Promise. And it's important that we continue to try and deliver those ambitions, effectively putting our money where our mouths are. And holiday activity clubs are crucial to parents and pupils alike, both in terms of fun and enjoyment, but also in terms of addressing the real issues of holiday hunger in a dignified way. And I'm delighted that we are supported both by Scottish Government and indeed colleagues in Perth and Kinross Council to this effect. And in respect of Perth City North, I'm pleased that Councillor Massey and I are able to work together with Councillor Leisman to deliver for our constituents. £13,000 is not a huge amount of money, but it will allow an expansion of what Lethem for All's community fridge are able to stock, and it will allow them to stock staple cupboard items like toilet rolls, sanitary products and toothpaste, products which are vital to dignified provision. And as a local member, I'm delighted to see this proposal coming forward. In terms of the Tulloch Ball Court, I was really disappointed that Saints in the Community did not receive UEFA funding in Athens in November. Their presentation was powerful and deserved to win the award. However, the match funding that we are providing here today of £35,000 will allow Saints in the Community to move forward with this much needed and deserved Tulloch Ball Court. So I will be voting for the SNP's budget today. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Revick. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Provost. The SNP budget motion proposes a council tax freeze with recurrent funding from the Scottish Government to cover a 5% increase. I know some feel this is the wrong approach and councils need the extra funding and the ability to raise council tax to support spending across the council. But this is about our constituents who've had to weather a huge inflationary rises on every aspect of their lives, especially on food and the cost of heating their homes. Prioritising them now and at least having one bill they won't rise this year will help many of our residents cope with how the economy has been crashed. This council needs to work differently, changing how we use our capital assets and working in collaboration with the other public sector partners and the third sector to provide more efficient services, more aligned to the challenges ahead. Our Community Assets Transfer Service will be fully funded to support this change and how services are structured. In last year's budget, the Council voted to fund the current PKC run model for the public toilets, providing the opportunity to engage with communities and look for alternative models of keeping these assets open for public use. In Blairgowrie and Rattray, we have an amazing Blairgowrie and Rattray Development Trust, who after consultation have developed an ambitious plan and a new delivery model for the toilets, initially as a short-term lease. The leader of the council and senior officers have confirmed to me that they are now working with the Development Trust to ensure this leasing arrangement can take place from the 1st of April. Working differently and in collaboration with our communities is the way forward for providing some of our public services, and this is just one example. The different political groups and councillors in this chamber have different priorities for how we structure services and allocate the resources we have. I am proud that the SNP group has prioritised tackling poverty and supporting those most in need during these difficult times, while paying heed to the climate emergency and the challenges it brings. There's more funding for the Financial and Security Fund, funding for PCAVs, the Big House Project, Buttons and Bows Baby Bank, reassigning the COVID reserve to an anti-poverty fund, funding for food and fun activities during school holidays, rejecting cuts to public transport and extra funding to have free bus travel one Saturday each month, and funding of our welfare rights teams are all just examples in our budget. Our local communities contain many groups of volunteers working tirelessly for the betterment of their local area. Many of these groups are successful at obtaining funding from external organisations and trust funds, funding that the council cannot access. However, our budget amendment will continue to fund the Community Investment Fund and the Green Living Fund participatory budget process through the lapse. And as convener of Health, Housing and Social Wellbeing, I look forward to again discussing the criteria for these two funds with committee members. As we currently stand, the Green Living Fund with 51 projects has 3,795 votes from 1,073 people, and we've still got a week to go. So always this type of access to money for the public and everybody having the chance to vote as a model that the public accept. The council does have opportunities to generate income that can be used to support the general fund. PK Lets is one such activity where the council housing team supports property regeneration outside of the HRA, letting those properties for private rent and supporting private landlords for a nominal fee. Advertising and promoting this activity to generate income for the council is an activity that benefits landlords, tenants and the public purse. As a council, we should be more active at exploring these opportunities where they arise. Provost, I commend the SNP budget motion and hope others can work with us to support those in our community who are most at need. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Provost. I too would like to thank all the officers for their advice and detailed information around the budget, and in echoing the comments of Councillor Rebick, to all our staff across the council for whom today is as difficult a day for them as it is for us in the chamber. I'm pleased to support the Scottish Conservative budget today. At every community meeting, we hear of the impact of services, positive and negative, and it is against that backdrop that all councillors today will make choices about how we allocate our budgets, whether it be pitch hire fees, investment in community kitchens such as Giraffe, or practical measures to support children and young people in their learning. We know that the addition of relatively small pots of money can be used creatively and to great advantage by our communities, local sports clubs, teachers and school staff. Even against the difficult financial backdrop, we need to ensure that we do what we can to continue these efforts. We do need the Scottish Government to fairly fund our service delivery and stop asking us to do more with fewer resources. The budget setting at Holyrood yesterday will have implications beyond our chambers and in our communities, and we will no doubt be left to pick up some of the pieces. We need to be able to plan services for the longer term and not be left with last-minute hope of some money being thrown our way. My focus today will be on the area of children, young people and their families. We've rejected the cuts proposed to educational psychology, school crossing patrollers where there are no safe physical measures for children to cross to school, and I welcome the Leader of the Council's comments to continue working with Tayside contracts to proactively fill vacancies. I welcome the addition into the administration motion of the rejection of any further reductions to devolved school management budgets, as we understand the impact this might have on some of our smaller schools. In a time when our teaching staff and classroom assistants are facing increased demands in managing emotional and physical behaviour in schools, we've also sought to maintain teacher capacity and build some flexibility into the system to support schools in cases where it's really needed. We'd like to do a lot more as we recognise this as a real pressure in our schools, and I very much hope that the Scottish Government will respond to the calls from teachers for greater support as they face increasing challenging behaviours across schools, whilst they also juggle continuing the work to help children catch up on learning loss during COVID. I thank the Leader of the Council for accepting our proposal of £20,000 as proposed in our budget for the development of quiet spaces in schools. I'm always struck by the creativity of teachers and school staff in making good use of the facilities they have within their school buildings and grounds, and we know that small sums of money can go a long way to creating areas in school where youngsters can be taken for one-to-one time and small group learning, which also has a benefit to other pupils within classrooms. Anyone who has come across the School of Football programme will be aware of the impact it's had in schools in East Perthshire. And to declare an interest, here's a trustee of Blairgowrie Rattree Football Club who have employed 2 development officers to deliver the programme. The meeting held last...
Somebody has their device mic open. Can you all check, please? The Leader of the Council has confessed to be the guilty one. So, Councillor Shires, you can continue.
I'm not a massive football fan, so I'm just gonna, but who have employed 2 development officers to deliver the programme. The meeting held last year regarding the inspection of Rattray Primary highlighted it as an example of innovative practice in using PEF to encourage engagement in schools, and having heard of the success in my local area, I'd like to see it rolled, no pun intended, out into other schools so more youngsters can benefit. I congratulate the SFA and the Football Community Development Officers operating from Rattray who've helped with the successful delivery, and I would urge the administration to have a look at it for future budget proposals. Finally, I'd like to mention the funds in the Scottish Conservative budget for public toilets. 85,000 is all that is required to keep the facilities open and allow a transition over to a new operating model. Councillor Braun and I have been working with the Development Trust in Blairgowrie to find solutions to the future of our loos, and I thank all those who have stepped up to help. However, it is my belief that basic services such as toilets should be provided by the local authority. For years I sat in budget meetings when year after year the loos were put forward as saving proposals, and under various administrations they were rejected until last year, and I think this is a hugely disappointing situation. Our communities want us to listen to them and they want to work with us. As I said, Provost, this is all about choices. We all must use loos. All of us who travel for a day out or go on holiday will seek a toilet upon arrival, especially if travelling with children. We agreed in this chamber just a few months ago to support efforts to provide facilities for men with prostrate issues, and we agreed they needed bins, but this council set to take away toilets. Pitlochry in your ward, Provost, and Dunkeld in your ward, Councillor Lang, however, are protected because they make money. Blairgowrie is the biggest town in Perth and Kinross. It's on the A93 tourist route. It is a town where we're working hard to promote ourselves as a visitor destination. The cafes and bars around the centre of town only have limited loo provision, so aren't keen to join a comfort scheme. We need publicly provided toilets, and the views of the community need to be listened to and not ignored. Provost, in summary, against the most challenging budget backdrop, I'm happy to support the Scottish Conservative budget proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Bailey Ahern.
Thank you, Provost, for the opportunity to speak to our Conservative budget. Today is probably the one day each year that our decisions matter most to the people of Perth and Kinross. Every pound we allocate will have an effect on someone, be it at home, in the community, on the road, or someone's health. But one of the biggest impacts of our decisions is keeping our residents safe, trying to support them. If we're unable to provide this support, they may become yet another unfortunate but preventable statistic. Governments and local authorities can't do everything to help our residents, and we rely more and more on the third sector to deliver some of that support. Here in Perth and Kinross, some of our most upsetting cases are those of women and some men who have been raped, sexually abused, or living in fear of constant domestic violence, or those that have sadly decided the only way out of their nightmare is to commit suicide. Never is this more upsetting and distressing when it's a young person. In Perth and Kinross alone, we currently have over 140 young people that have either thought seriously about or have tried to commit suicide and are currently seeking support workers in the school as well as the Lighthouse in Perth City. Without these support workers at the Lighthouse, they may well have lost hope and a reason to live and ended up being yet another statistic. RASAC is a resource that is vital in support of those of any age that have been the victim of rape or domestic violence. Well, not only do they support them through the trauma, but in many instances help them and support them through a very challenging legal system. They may help them to become survivors and move forward. Women's Aid is another charity that supports women and families through domestic violence and give victims support, and more importantly, a safe place to leave that violence behind. These are the stark reminders of why we must support the third sector to deliver these vital services. In our budget, we've decided to allocate 100,000 to the Lighthouse, as well as in continuing to support RASAC and Women's Aid, repeating as we have done previously with an additional 40,000 each. But I'm glad to see that the administration have allocated 30,000 for both RASAC and Women's Aid, and this will make a big difference. In Perth and Kinross, we have many other mental health charities that help those with varying mental health problems. We propose another 60,000 to support community mental health groups, for example, the Men's Shed, Women's Wellbeing Club, Mindspace and Andy's Man's Club, to name a few. And I'm grateful to the administration for including this funding in their motion. Again, without the third sector, we as a local authority would struggle to provide these services, and our budgets would definitely not be big enough to cover these services in-house. Our budget shows that we are caring and supporting those that are unable to care for themselves and who, without the extra funding, will almost certainly not get that support. I'll be supporting the Conservative budget.
Thank you, Bailey Ahern. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, like everyone else, I'd like to thank all the officers and everybody else that was in the BRG. It does seem to be a lot of very hard work when we've reached a very good conclusion. So thanks for everybody for their hard work. My comment is a bit more parochial regarding my ward. As you all probably saw yesterday, there was an announcement by Stagecoach regarding bus travel, which was quite surprising and will cause quite a lot of problems both in Cardiff Gowrie and probably wider in Perthshire. Therefore, I welcome the inclusion of the Buses 2030 initiative by the Labour Group into the motion, which I think will provide some good work to find alternatives to the public transport organisation we presently have, which is overly reliant on parties outside of the county without knowing the local initiatives. So therefore, I welcome the Labour proposal and I will be supporting the SNP motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor James next, please.
Thank you very much, Provost. A bit surprising this year, to be honest. And I had something written down as notes, which in all honesty, I can't use because strangely enough, there's a general consensus that we all want the same thing. And there's been no nasty political rhetoric, which we've had for the last 5-6 years or 5 years when we were in administration, where it was the nasty Tories and lack of funding from Westminster. No talk of any funding problems this year. But anyway, the cost of everything, value of nothing. What I'm delighted to see, though, is that everybody, or the SNP, but particularly our own group, included the visitor ranger service in their budget. Excuse me. They're a dedicated team of unsung heroes, and they provide more than just a visitor interface, way more than that, and pretty much overlooked, but they're guardians of our wildlife, protect our trees, remove unwanted litter, prevent dangerous fires, many other associated jobs with that. They're the public face of Perth and Kinross Council, and I know the cost of their service. I also know the value of it. In my mind, it's priceless. We need to listen and engage with our residents and listen to their needs and ideas. The Tayside and Central Moreland Group stood outside our offices this morning, a testament to that. They felt the bid for a national park is unnecessary burden on their landowners and land managers, and will be burdened with the fallout from that in future budgets, no doubt. Yeah, again, we have to find money to keep libraries open in order that our residents and especially our children have access or easy access to books. It's under threat every budget, but I'm delighted to see that provisions being made for this. Several things in our Conservative budget, which although the leader of the administration, it's commendable that he did come and speak to everybody to try and include stuff within his budget. There's some very important things within that, which I think are completely missing. It's what the public expect from us. One I'm particularly thinking of, which I'm quite pleased that the Conservative administration included in their budget, was the gullies and potholes. It's what people want from us. That said, I'm grateful to our officers who spent vast amounts of time trying to please everybody and trying to come up with budgets or differing budgets for all the groups. Luckily, our the Conservative administration, when we were in, protected our reserves, and thank the Lord we did. Prudent spending and even the returning of money to the reserve in year 3 is a sensible approach, and I would urge you to support a Conservative budget. Thank you very much indeed, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson next, please.
Thank you, Provost, and also thank you for all the work that's gone by officers and councillors that have gone into preparing the budgets today and amendments. I have to say that I think I would like to see a change in emphasis, and I'm going to be political. I'd like to see a change of emphasis from the Scottish Government. I really think they must learn to trust councils more and trust councillors more. It's unfortunate that we have entered another council tax freeze time, because I remember when we had it before, and it did a lot of damage to our ability to raise incrementally the amount of money we had. I think we should never lose that ability to raise taxation locally. And I think more understanding of how councils work and more trust in councils would be a good way to go forward. As a country, we are getting slowly but surely poorer. We even struggle as a council to provide things like litter bins. If you ask for a litter bin, it's like asking for a new town hall. And it's a very, very sad state of affairs. More and more people seem to be slipping into poverty despite the best efforts of ourselves and our officers. I feel that we need to make our communities much more resilient. In this country now, if you're born poor, you're liable to remain poor, and more people are likely to join you. That's a very bad state of affairs. On the budget itself, I'm really pleased to see that the Community Investment Fund has been saved, even though it has been cut by 25%. I know in my own ward that the difference that has made to many, many local projects, whether it's buying equipment for a paths group or upgrading a village hall. When you're giving money to these groups, they're attracting money from other places as well. So the money that they get, that we spend on this fund, actually accumulates substantially and draws more money in. I'm also slightly concerned about our use of reserves, and I'm pleased that in the Lib Dem budget that there's moves been taken to try and restore our reserves in the years going forward. And I'm also very pleased to see that we have managed to safeguard our public transport budget, because people rely on the ability to get to work, to get about. It saves a lot of social isolation. I spoke to one of the drivers of the Glenfire community bus, and he says that this old man got on the bus the other day there to go to Perth, and he said, "Where are you going today?" And he says, "Oh, I'm just going to Perth." And he says, "What are you going to be doing in Perth?" He says, "I'm going to be getting this bus back again." He says, "If I didn't have this bus, I would never get out of the house." So it's really good for people to be able to get out and about. And I think that's why it's important. We always keep that in mind. So I'll be happy to support the Lib Dem budget. And I like Councillor James. I'm pleased to see that we have a better approach to the budget and trying to share the difficulties that we all face. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Provost. We're all in agreement that this has been a very challenging budget to prepare for. We all have our views as to why and why we and other local authorities find ourselves in this situation. But that said, we must deal with what has been presented to us by officers. As a group, we have always tried to apply 3 factors as part of our budgets to maintain our essential services, to help those of our community that need help, our vulnerable citizens, and to encourage economic development and growth. This has always presented a difficult balance to make at the best of times, but for this year it has been more difficult. As a result, the central core of our deliberations has been to ensure funding is in place to retain those essential services offered by this council and to reject those cuts which we consider would have the most detrimental impact on Perth and Perth and Kinross as a whole. One such was street cleansing. We want to attract visitors, local and from further afield, to our city and towns. To do this, we want and need to present ourselves to look as best as we can. The street cleaners make a significant contribution to achieving this, and therefore we proposed to reject the cut, and I'm pleased that this has been widely recognised across all groups. Becoming homeless for whatever reason is a devastating experience and leaves anyone feeling vulnerable. That place called home has gone. Therefore, the services that we provide to offer help in such desperate circumstances, or more importantly, that try to seek prevention, should be retained. We all know of the good work that is done by officers, and consequently we have rejected cuts to housing and homeless support. Again, this was widely recognised. And just as important for many is being able to return to home and community if improvements and adaptations can be carried out to homes following illness or disability. So I'm pleased that we have been able to reject proposed savings to the care and repair service. Being home is recognised as one of the best means to recovery and avoids unnecessary stays in hospital, releasing beds for other patients. Our amendment also offers a number of new proposals. Firstly, we have allocated £60,000 to Bloom Groups, to Friends of Cemeteries and Path Groups, all these volunteers who give their time to improve the appearance of our towns and villages. As we know, Live Active Leisure has its own financial challenges, and we intended to fund them to the tune of £90,000 to allow continued management of the Athol Leisure Centre and the community halls, whilst opportunities for community asset transfers or community managements are fully investigated. And again, I'm glad that the council leader has taken this on. And I'm very pleased that we have been able to fund the Community Investment Fund to the same level as we proposed last year, namely £400,000. This facility is a true means of delegating empowerment by giving a panel of local residents the ability to decide on funding applications from local groups. Experience has shown that this to be a well-received facility, both by those making up the ward panels and the groups themselves. I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking Scott Walker and all his team. I won't name them all because I would probably forget something, that'd be rude, to all of his team for their hard work and support over the last weeks. And more importantly, perhaps their patience in dealing with our various queries, questions, and often lack of numerical understanding. Provost, I'm sure that we could all agree on the fundamental principle that for every person in Perth and Kinross, our desire is to make tomorrow a little better, a little easier than today. And I think all in all, we have all done our best to achieve that today. We started with the distinct possibility of having to deal with severe, some would describe them as brutal, cuts to services, damaging the very fabric of what a local authority should be. However, against all this, I believe that we have been able to do what we set out to do, to maintain the services most important to residents, to help those in need, and to give us assistance where we could for economic development. Finally, if I may, I note officers are working to allow the local development trust in Bilagari to take over the running of the public toilets by the 1st of April, and I thank them for all their efforts in trying to achieve this. However, I must say that public toilets are a service, they are not a business, and shouldn't be judged on statistical information or what income they bring in. They should be regarded as a core service of a local authority. With that in mind, Provost, I fully support the Conservative amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. I have a fairly lengthy list here of contribution requests, and it's a fairly good mix across the council. So if anyone hasn't added their name but wishes to add their name, please do so now. Otherwise, I will close that as the list. Councillor Massey next, please.
Thank you, Provost. Efficiently, effectively and equitably. This well-structured budget motion put before you by the SNP administration will ensure that those in need will receive the support they require, which will ultimately benefit the economy of Perth and Kinross. We have done this by using our resources efficiently, effectively and equitably, and therefore our budget will improve the financial stability of individuals and families, leading to an improved overall well-being and economic growth in Perth and Kinross. One of the key aspects of the SNB budget is its potential to address the specific needs of the vulnerable population. Using the SNP government's freeze on council tax will leave 4,739,000 and a potential 6,429,000 in the pockets of our residents. Unlike the proposal from the Liberals to raise council tax by 6.9%, taking nearly 7 million out of residents' pockets and their local economy. Leaving the money in residents' pockets will give some much needed financial assistance to those facing hardships such as low-income families, individuals with disabilities and the elderly, reducing the financial burden and improving their quality of life. When households receive financial support, like the freeze on the council tax bill, they are more likely to spend the money locally on essential goods and services, thereby stimulating economic activity in Perth and Kinross. Increased consumer spending can boost demand for local businesses, create job opportunities and drive economic growth in the region. This approach not only supports those in need, but also contributes to the reducing social inequalities within our community. In summary, this SNP budget prioritises helping people, investing in programmes that support people in need, which will not only benefit those people directly affected, but also contribute to the overall economic resilience of our area. Through our strategic investment and targeted support, this budget will create a more inclusive and prosperous society for all our residents. The SNP budget motion contributes to social welfare, economic growth and community development by ensuring that resources have been allocated efficiently, effectively and equitably. Thank you. I support this SNP budget motion.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. Councillor Allen next, please.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, I'd like to just give my thanks to everybody who's been involved throughout, because I think an inordinate amount of hours and time and head scratching has taken place. And come the end of the day and today, I don't actually think we're all that far away. During the budgeting in the Scottish Parliament yesterday, I thought it was extremely refreshing to hear Shona Robison say that she was majoring on protecting public services. Over the last year, we've come up against the threat of closures to our attended public toilets in all bar 2 of our towns. It's quite inconceivable that we're considering completely closing facilities in Auchterarder, Crieff, Perth and Blairgowrie. We cannot decide that these should be closed on footfall alone. That doesn't tell us the whole picture. All of our towns depend on tourism as well as localised footfall. If we take away these toilets from our towns and communities, they'll start a decline in visitors, and this is not good for any one of our towns in Perth and Kinross. It's almost certainly a retrograde step for the towns earmarked to completely lose their toilet facilities. They can be kept open as unattended, for example. And I echo the comments from Councillor Shires, who spoke earlier on the same subject. We need an urgent review of toilet facilities and a reversal of last year's decision to close them. We can do things differently, but we cannot close them. We cannot treat every service as a business. Toilet facilities are not businesses. They are really important community assets as well as very important public services, and we need to keep them open. Further, we should retain their opening times longer throughout the year. People do not stop visiting Auchterarder and Crieff between the months of October and March. Our libraries. I'm delighted to hear the administration budget have recognised the need to retain our libraries. They too are very important public services. We all do our best as councillors and officers to encourage numeracy and literacy. We talk about attainment. We're apparently building a place where our young people can all be what they can be. We're hopefully enabling them to achieve their full potential. Knowledge is power. Reading is a fantastic form and pastime. We should be encouraging our young people to use our libraries, not closing them down. They also double up for many other purposes, where people meet, cosy spaces, internet, community hubs, the list goes on. Once again, our libraries, they're not public services. Sorry, our libraries are public services. They are not businesses. They are not and won't ever be profit-making enterprises. Let's get real here. We don't need to close them. We just need an entrepreneurial approach to managing them differently and better. Maybe that's the issue right there. I'm also delighted that the administration has agreed that we're not considering doing away with our school crosser patrol officers. They are not businesses either. They are our safety barrier in very important places, looking after our most vulnerable people. We should be thoroughly ashamed of ourselves the day we pursue taking these posts away. These patrollers don't work long hours. They don't get big wages, but they care, and so should we. I'd just like to reiterate that some services are needed. They're not profit-making businesses. We have the ability within our gift today to sort these important and emotive services. Let's review and see if we can do things better. Fellow councillors, let's do the right thing and retain our libraries and our school crossing patrollers. Can we also show a bit of common sense here and look to review the decision taken last year, wrongly, to cut toilet services altogether in Auchterarder, Blairgowrie, Crieff and Perth. I represent 4 communities with my comments today, as is clear from what I've just said. Please hear me. Save our toilets. It was really good to be visited by Councillor Lang today and an acceptance of 2 of our 3 asks. Our number 1 ask was for the toilets to be reconsidered. Please don't let it be too late. In a year where we aren't that far apart and collegiate working seems to be coming to fruition, let's just at least think about how we can do things better. Totally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Freshwater, please.
Thank you very much, Provost, and can I echo the comments of thanks to officers and fellow elected members for getting us to the budget meeting today. There are 2 points that I would like to make in relation to our Scottish Conservative amendment. The first relates to our proposal for the additional non-recurring spending of £650,000 for welfare rights. This would match the funding for last year in relation to financial insecurity and recognises the ongoing financial challenges that many of our residents will be facing with the ongoing high cost of living. So I would commend this important additional funding in the Scottish Conservative amendment to ensure that this vital service continues. But my second point, as has been touched on already, relates to the proposal to reject the cut of £775,000 to public transport. But I'm glad to see that there is quite clearly a consensus on this developing in the Chamber. Whilst this is a significant amount of taxpayer money, and it's easy to criticise buses which are seen driving around with very few passengers, for many people, as has been touched on already, this is a lifeline for their working or social livelihood, and we should not make decisions lightly. It also obviously provides a vital role in reducing our carbon emissions. However, as I've said, it is not an insignificant amount of money, and therefore we are duty bound to get good value in the services that we commission. And this means making sure that, for example, the buses are not breaking down and causing delays and are importantly running at the times and places that they are needed. If I can be parochial for a minute, just to highlight my point, we have seen, as has been mentioned twice already, a great success story in the Kinrossshire ward with the Glenfarg Community Transport, who've taken on the number 55 bus service between Perth, Glenfarg and Kinross. Since taking over the service, the 55 has seen an increased number of weekly passengers from 120 to 750 per week. They've achieved this by, as I've said, having the right vehicles in the right place at the right time. It might seem obvious, it shouldn't be hard, but it's success that has received nationwide acclaim as an exemplar for rural transport with interest from media across the UK. But successful public transport requires embracing technology. Whilst it's not publicly funded, other than through those who receive bus passes, the Ember E1 electric bus service between Dundee and Edinburgh is providing an enormous success, proving an enormous success and providing a nearly 24-hour service for Kinrossshire residents along the M90-A90 corridor. Part of its success is using demand response, a simple web-based technology that prevents unnecessary detours unless passengers are waiting, meaning the service can be optimised and adapt to real-time demand and serve even more communities. Similarly, Glenfarg Transport, that I've touched on, are very keen to use this technology and will begin trialling this soon on the 55 service. As the council leader has said, no one has a monopoly on ideas, and these 2 examples I've just mentioned show how both community-run transport and unpublic funded private sector can provide great service when done properly. In summary, we oppose the proposal to reduce the public transport funding by £775,000, and we would, as Councillor Duff mentioned in his speech, want to look at how things can be done more efficiently and consider these examples of best practice, such as those that I've mentioned in Kinrossshire and Glenfarg. And we can see how it is possible to provide a modern, efficient public transport, particularly in our rural areas, so that even more currently unserved areas can be included, but whilst ensuring best value for taxpayers. As I say, I'm very glad to see that we are getting a consensus on this issue, and I look forward to moving forward on that. But more broadly, I will be supporting the Scottish Conservative proposals today and commend them to the Chamber. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Freshwater. Councillor Liz Barrett, please.
Thank you, Provost. First, I'd like to thank Stuart, Scott, Alison, Caroline, Claire and Craig and all the finance team and the teams across the council for all their work on the budget, their swift responses to our queries and their endless patience, and also for letting me loose on the spreadsheet. I can't forget that I was elected on a promise of fairness, to protect services for those who need them most and safeguarding opportunities for our young people. I cannot forget that we have 6,000 children living in poverty in Perth and Kinross, and it's our job to protect the vulnerable, as Mr Glenn reminded us at the beginning of this meeting. Of all the proposals, the Lib Dem budget's the only one offering a sustainable way forward for our council into the uncertain future. It enables us to reject a swathe of unacceptable cuts to services and jobs, and it contributes 2 million to reserves over the next 3 years. I welcome that there's some consensus on giving support in some areas where it's needed most, but the Lib Dem budget enables us to apply more funds to these areas and puts our finances on a sounder footing. Our budget would put $1 million directly into tackling poverty through additional funding, plus another welfare rights officer to take some of the pressure off that brilliant team who makes such a difference to the most vulnerable. I'm quite horrified by acceptance of cuts to the budget for our children and young people in their education. We need to recognise the huge impact that COVID lockdowns have had on our youngest children in terms of development milestones, attachment to trusted adults, and learning to share with others. We need to address this at the earliest stages to achieve our goal of enabling all our young people to achieve their full potential. As Scotland slips down the international tables, the attainment gap widens and diagnosis of additional support needs and mental health issues just isn't happening. Our young people need more help, not cuts. And that's why the Lib Dem budget adds 50,000 for effective pupil support in our schools, both to support the young people who need help and to reduce the impact of disruptive behaviour on the rest of the classes. We're also protecting the budget for our young people who need residential care by reducing the proposed cuts to that service. Peter's spoken already of our commitment to continuing our nationally recognised initiatives to reduce the misery of homelessness. We want to make our halls and excess buildings more attractive for community asset transfers in line with our capital investment strategy, and we've proposed a £150,000 fund to support that. Everyone in this chamber is aware of the climate and biodiversity emergencies and the impact of climate change on weather patterns. That's why we'll add £100,000 to the budget to ensure that PKC can go on supporting communities in severe weather and set up a £50,000 Think Yes fund for equipment and training for our great community resilience groups. Sustainability isn't just about the environment, it's about the Council's finances too. Our proposed increase in council tax costs under £2 a week for Band D, £1 a week for Band A homes, and puts nearly 7 million into the base figures for the council going forward. I should also have mentioned that I'm absolutely committed to supporting those at risk of flooding, and I note the proposal to fund interest on £1 million for flood schemes in Dunkeld and Buckie Braes, which I think means the proposals for Craigie Burn at Queen's Avenue and Balmoral Avenue in my ward. As residents in Perth City South know, I'd love to wave a magic wand, and I've said that to them before, and I would love to support this, but it just isn't fair or practical. It isn't fair to the flood risk management schemes in Pitlochry, Aberfeldy and Blackford, and the flood studies awaited for Blair Athol and Bridge of Erne. These have been waiting for years for funding, and I'll speak more of the practical issues when this comes up in the next paper. Point 14 of our motion sets the level of uncommitted reserves at between 2 and 4% of the budget. This financial year, we slipped from 3.9% to 3.1%, or 14.137 million. But the Conservatives, Independents and Labour each proposed to take nearly 3 million from this just over the next 3 years. The SNP were doing quite well, taking just over 300,000 until lunchtime, when they chose to give out another million of reserves as sweeteners to those who will support their proposal. We're putting in help across the board for those who need it most. We're supporting our young people and families, and we're setting realistic foundations for sound financial management of Perth and Kinross Council going forward. Please support our amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Waters next, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to highlight the importance of retaining posts that will support delivery of this Council's priorities and actions in the Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan. and within our waste management plan. We have committed 80,000 this year and 30,000 next year to allow capacity to support the emerging circular economy bill and Scottish Government circular economy and waste route map. It will also allow the opportunity to build further bids for Recycle Improvement Fund and will help preserve service standards as well as being innovative in our approach to waste management. I welcome the funding to look at the provision of transport services in the area and anticipate that we will have the opportunity to consider progressive and sustainable options going forward. In line with some of my colleagues, and given that we've already had three of the four councillors now or the third of the four councillors who will be mentioned in the Glenfarg community bus, but I do feel it is important, so I will still carry on and add that. I do welcome the extra funding for community bus provision. It's essential to allow community groups to fill in the transport gaps within their communities. You know, having observed the success of the Glenfarg community bus, which started with, as Neil Freshwater already mentioned, which has went from 120 passengers a week up to 750. And it's not just about the numbers. It's about the social benefits brought by the service, allowing vulnerable individuals to access health, social and retail services. And as Councillor Robertson highlighted, allow people to get out of the house and meet people, including the friendly community bus driver. I commend the SNP budget, including additional items to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Councillor Donaldson next, please.
Provost, Deputy Provost, let me just start first by referring to Councillor Peter Barrett. And let me say, I agree with him. There is a need for reform of local government taxation, that we do need to move away from outmoded 1991 valuations to a system that's still based, that is based on property values, but much more current property values and something near to market. But that is not the issue that we're here to consider today. It is to set a balanced and prudent budget. And let me just make the point that under their proposals, and remember, inflation is still well above normal levels, that what they're proposing are council tax bills in March 2026, just 2 years from now, being over 20% higher. I don't think that's what local residents actually want. On public transport, I'm going to leave more to Deputy Provost Parrott, who I see is down to speak. But I will say I'm glad to see the Conservatives are back on the buses. Remember last year they voted for an 18% cut in bus services. That would have been disastrous, especially followed on with the news today. But we've not just ourselves rejected that £775,000 cut, but there's also additional proposals, and there's also the Labour proposals as well. But I think Deputy Provost Parrott is going to say more. On the library review, I think the important thing is to stress that this we're stating to maintain rural library provision for 1 year to allow communities, Culture, Perth and Kinross and the council to work together to develop a sustainable community-led model of library provision in localities. There's a need for to be proactive to a greater extent. I think also Culture PK staff have been fairly consumed over recent months with time allocated to the opening of the museum and the repurposing of the art gallery. And that's something we really look forward to in a month's time. I'm very pleased to see the proposal, not just on feasibility study funding, but identification of funding opportunities and a specific dedicated funding officer. That person's not there to help with local community applications. They're primarily there to go out and to seek additional funding. And hopefully that is something that can leverage in a lot more funding. Who knows, it might even help to get greater funds on the UK Levelling Up Fund, where we've got nothing so far, but then again, perhaps not. And finally, I want to turn to, and we've tried to be as collegiate as possible, and I do welcome the proposals, not just from Scottish Labour, but from the independent group. And yes, I'm being localist, but I do want to compliment Bailey Brock for the proposals for the funding for 3 years for Crieff Community Trust. I think that could well be money incredibly well spent, because it's seeding funding and it opens up, as we know, the possibility of and leveraging in greater funding for the people of Crieff. So I very much welcome that proposal. I support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Welch.
This is a bit like the bus service. You wait for ages and then two come along at the same time. I applaud the Conservative group for their handbrake turn and reversal of their anti-bus policies and the cuts they proposed in last year's budget. I am pleased that they now appear to be coming on board. Fantastic. But this council and working collaboratively with other councillors recognises the importance of high quality public transport provision. And both the Buses 2030 initiative and feasibility funding to support rail and bus hubs is an excellent progress in that direction. The recent announcement from Stagecoach proposing to withdraw important local bus services is more important than ever that these initiatives are successful, and I hope both officers and councillors work to achieve these aims. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Frampton next, please.
I'd like to thank the officers and all involved for the hard work putting this budget before us today. In the last administration, around 4,000 parents of our school trial children signed a petition opposing the introduction of frozen school meals delivered from a central production unit in Dundee. The online petition was ignored by the administration back then. It feels like the legacy of this decision sees the budget proposal of the Conservatives group to close all our breakfast clubs and raise the prices of school meals to £2.90 for primary pupils and £3.15 for secondary pupils. I find this disappointing. This definitely does not line up with their strategy of helping families who are suffering the consequences of a cost of living crisis. There are many families living throughout Perth and Kinross who live in poverty, and I don't refer to just families who are on benefits affected by poverty. I'm also referring to the many who are working poor. Breakfast clubs are a necessity to these families. However, I do welcome the proposal to introduce quiet places in our schools that currently don't have them. I will be voting for the SNP budget today.
Thank you, Councillor Frampton. Deputy Provost next, please.
Thank you, Archprovost. I feel as if my sandwiches have been stolen, or perhaps in this context, my digital smart card or e-ticket, but I'll go ahead. No economy, national or local, can be successful without a transport infrastructure fit and proper for our times. So I welcome and ask others to welcome three things in particular. Our funding to offer free travel to all on selected days to influence and change transport behaviour as we confront climate change, as well as further helping those with more limited means. Secondly, our funding for feasibility studies that can look at possible improvements to our local public transport infrastructure, both bus and rail, in the medium and long term. And in the context particularly of yesterday's announcement about bus services, I welcome an acceptance of the proposal to look at options for the better organisation, management and running of our bus services in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Councillor McCall. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. Like others, I wish to add my thanks to the officers of the Council who have provided support and information to all fellow councillors and all of the budget review groups. The SNP budget motion before us today reflects our priorities to address inequalities, protect services and provide support to those in our communities who are most vulnerable and most in need. As has been acknowledged by other contributors today, I am pleased that our SNP budget recognises the valuable contribution of our external partners, third sector organisations and the many community groups who provide a variety of resources where people live. I welcome the provisions that are made for these organisations in our SNP budget motion. In particular, I welcome the additional provision of £200,000 from our transformation reserves for the Health and Social Care Partnership to support the work they are doing to transform how they deliver and protect social care and services. I would also like to take this opportunity to commend the Leader of the Council for his commitment to work with other political groups to achieve, wherever possible, a shared understanding and common purpose. That commitment is, I believe, reflected in the SNP budget motion. Regarding the current financial climate, I think it would be remiss of all of us not to recognise and acknowledge that the impact of the continued erosion of and disinvestment in public services by the Westminster Government, that in turn has a consequential negative impact on the funding available to the Scottish Government to allocate to councils. Councils and indeed public sector organisations across all of the UK are feeling the financial pain of those decisions taken at Westminster. But challenging as the financial climate is for us in Perth and Kinross, the SNP budget motion before us today is not only financially balanced and prudent, it is fair and proportionate and provides a stable financial position from which we can support economic development while investing in, maintaining, transforming and improving our services for the people of Kinross. The SNP budget motion has my full support and I wholeheartedly commend it to the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I just wanted to add my thanks to the accounting team. They've been long suffering, particularly Scott, who's probably asleep in the back row there. You're able now to sleep because that's the last night. I think we had the reputation of having more questions than all the other groups put together at one point. And I apologise for that. And you can see the chief executives agree. The reason we did that was that we took a look at some of the proposed cuts, things like, for example, the 4,359,000 rationalisation of education staff in year 3, and we said we can't take that because it's a pig in a poke. That was my expression. And so we had to look all over the place to try and find other savings. You'll see that we've probably got more than anyone else in our budget. I wanted to thank also the leader for accepting a couple of proposals. One is the campus targets. This may mean nothing to most councillors, but basically campuses are set targets and then they try to achieve them. And in doing so, it's causing community groups to be priced out of using the campuses at weekends in particular. It is a discussion we'll have to have further, but in principle, by putting this in, it halves the target and makes it more possible for community groups to use the campuses at weekends. I'd also like to thank him for adopting the ADAPT schools and campuses to encourage community use. It does strike me that we've got a big estate of schools all around Perth and Kinross, and some of them could be used for other purposes. We could perhaps put libraries in some of them, for example, but to do that you need a fund to make it possible, and that's what this is intended for. So if it requires a secondary door, that may be possible to put in. Finally, I would like to ask that I was really pleased to see that all the groups rejected the road safety saving, and I would ask if officers would consider not putting it in again, given that all political parties put it forward as a refusal. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, please.
Thank you, Provost. There's a sad inevitability about this budget. We've got a revenue budget of over 400 million, yet all we can do is tinker around the edges, making small changes here and there. No one in this room can possibly think that's democratic. We are, as was said earlier by someone else, agents of the Scottish Government, hamstrung to their priorities. I think it was Councillor Ling that said there's common ground across the groups, and that's simply because we're left with little else to do and nowhere else to go. But we know how this is going to play out. We'll vote for our budget, the SNP will vote for their budget. The final decision will be left to the smaller groups to decide who they support. And I have no doubt a deal has already been reached, although I would urge those smaller groups to look closely at the ideas in our budget, because democracy is pretty simple. You listen to your constituents, you understand the issues in your ward, and you do what you can to help. That's what the main theme is in our budget, and I'm delighted to see that Councillor Ling has already accepted 2 of our proposals. Sadly not our number 1, which was the request to keep the toilets open, And we learned earlier from Councillor Duff that more people signed a Conservative petition to keep the toilets open than joined a consultation about the new National Park proposal. And given the resources that the Council had to throw at that consultation, it really must tell us something, either about how important toilets are, or alternatively, how little importance people put on a national park. Flooding has already been spoken about today by Councillor Barrett when he pointed out, quite rightly, that it's totally inappropriate for the SNP to use local taxpayers' money to fund their favourite flood prevention schemes, which will result in a loss of public funds for that very purpose. However, the irony that the Liberals want to lose the council tax freeze money and put that additional burden on to local taxpayers is lost to no one in this room. And as is confirmed by the SNP in their desire to cherry pick their favourite flood prevention schemes, we know that flooding affects everyone, and it's for that reason we've allocated more money to clearing out gullies and drains in our roads, which will have an impact on flooding in the future. And verges are another contentious matter. There are different views on this, I accept that, but I'm pleased to see the slowing down of the no-mow policy, a recognition by the SNP that they need to do more to take the public with them. But the same concerns exist for uncut verges. They're not only unsightly, but they cause a real road safety hazard for drivers and cyclists. It's for that reason we're not only rejecting that saving, but putting more money into it. In order to do what we can to keep people moving and keep them safe, we're rejecting proposed savings on winter maintenance, road safety, green space, infrastructure and visitor rangers. And on the topic of visitor rangers, I was surprised to see this appearing as non-recurring because just a short time ago, Councillors Donaldson and Brock brought a motion to this very room to make that service permanent, while we argued we should wait until the budget before we decided. We lost that vote, but it seems we've won it anyway. Councillors Donaldson and Brock must be furious. You'll notice we've not made any allowance for play parks. We all know the Scottish Government will renew every play park in Scotland in the next few years, so any funding going that way would be wasted. And of course, there's been a lot of chat about public transport, and as Councillor Lang said, yesterday's announcement has focused our attention even more so on that issue. I can't support a publicly owned bus network because back in the days of British Rail, I travelled every week for 4 years to Liverpool for university by train, and I can assure you it was not a pleasant experience. The public sector is just not designed to run these kind of operations. However, we must do something different, and that's what our proposal was about. And I should say I'm grateful to my ward colleagues Bailey and Councillor Harvey for responding today to my request that we set aside our political differences to work together to try and stop Stagecoach making such horrific cuts to the bus services in our ward. And just before I finish, Provost, I must respond to Councillor Frampton's comment about the changes to the process of providing school meals. And I would gently remind her the SNP administration have been around for almost 2 years. It's entirely in their gift to make any changes that they wish to do. It seems that her group are not taking heed of their petition either. To finish, our budget is simple and sensible budget that will help to keep Perth and Kinross looking beautiful, enhance the stunning countryside we already have, and enhance it even more. For that reason, I'd say to the smaller groups, there's very little difference between us. Have a look, and maybe you can support us.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Forbes. Bailey to sum up, please.
Thank you, Provost. These budgets each tell a story, but the story isn't actually in the savings we reject. That's just making changes to the tip of the iceberg that is the council's overall finances. It's in the savings taken, that it's in the additional savings found, the pressures rejected and the additional expenditures. It pays to dig into those, so I'll share a few stories just now from that sometimes dry part of today's paperwork. I was disappointed to see the rejection of the school slippage pressure by the administration and the Conservatives. That results in jobs staying unfilled for longer when people leave or retire from our schools. That's fewer frontline staff in our schools. That's £386,000 to be precise of lower school staffing budgets in the SNP amendment, and it recurs, meaning it hits every year. Turning to the additional expenditure pressures that the Labour amendment offers, £200,000 for external organisations to tackle inequalities. We view that as being a better way to solve for the problems we face versus the £30,000 here and £40,000 there, one-off in the others. Buttons and Bows, RASAC, Citizen Advice and the like all do fantastic work. However, it concerns me that we approved a corporate plan not long ago, and now we wish to channel money to specific organisations without an assessment against that plan. The notion of following the public pound to ensure that taxpayer money is effectively deployed seems to have gone out the window. Overall, though, there's some good proposals from across the chamber today. I wish to warmly thank the SNP administration for the incorporation of the business case development for new buses. And to my colleague, Councillor Forbes, I'd highlight that this isn't necessarily just public ownership. The amendment reads public ownership, public interest and franchising models. So we're not nationalising the buses. I met a great many worried people on the X7 on the way here this morning who had just heard the service they use daily was about to be cut. I'll hopefully catch a few of them on the way home to share the news that their council does care and the help is on the way, albeit sadly in the longer term rather than the short term. I commend the free Saturday bus service that's being offered from the SNP administration, and I hope there's still buses available in my ward for people to use. I commend the administration on taking action on the Tayside contracts filling of vacancies. This is something I first noticed, I think, at the end of the last decade. It's not all rosy, though. I remember a vote not so many years ago when we were promised that the highest standards of food in PKC school meals would be preserved in spite of it moving to the same centralised production unit as Dundee City Council and Angus Council use. The spoiler alert here is that it costs more to do that extra provision, and it was up for a £400,000 cut in this budget. That's gone now, with that cut being accepted across the board apart from in our amendment, and it removes those extra items and downgrades our food offer to that of the Dundee City Council and Angus Council. In closing, just one comment on tax. I want the record to show that although I don't think it's the right position to take today, I do commend Peter Barrett's group for taking a stand on that important point of local democracy. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Bailey. Councillor Barrett, please, to sum up.
Thanks, Provost. I want to commend my colleagues on their contributions to today's debate. Stuart Donaldson is perfectly correct. There are clear differences between the Scottish Liberal Democrats group approach to sustainable funding for Perth and Kinross Council and the administrations. There's also considerable differences between the priority we place on protecting the most vulnerable and maximising opportunity and life chances for our children and young people. It might appear to anyone listening to some of the debate today that the biggest challenge facing this council is people wanting to spend a penny rather than the £4.5 million worth of cuts to vital supports for children and young people in their formative years. And I'm gobsmacked, Provost, that the Conservatives' #1 red line is for small change. And that they share the same disregard for young people and education as the administration. That £4.5 million cut across the whole of the education service is unconscionable, and if we need an emergency handbrake turn anywhere, it is there. Sometimes there may be little difference between the rhetoric of political groups, and there is a significant degree of overlap between some of our proposals and some of the administrations, but there's not enough, and certainly not enough to make us want to vote for their budget. There is clear water between our priorities and our financial strategy in the medium term. So, barring a Damascene conversion and a lightning strike on this chamber in the next 10 minutes, I suspect that we've not been successful in persuading members of the fundamental need to act decisively now. The Scottish Government is never going to come to the financial aid of local government, so our budget reality is a choice between the downward spiral of cuts accompanied by presentational tinkering around the financial edges, or a break from the tried and failed. We need to take its inspiration from Obama, or even from Annie Lennox and Aretha Franklin, and start doing things for ourselves. Thank you very much, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Colin Stewart next, please.
Thank you, Provost. Firstly, I would like to thank the Leader of the Council for incorporating so many of the suggestions from the independent group, but also from other groups in the Chamber. I think that's a responsible, mature and collegiate approach to setting the budget process. And I think that the particular inclusions that he's made from the other groups are key ones which will support our communities and prevent prevent deterioration in a lot of critical services. And as I indicated earlier, I'd like to thank officers also for incorporating some of our suggestions into their budget proposals today. But more importantly, I would like to come back and thank officers again for the time that they spent with us answering our questions and letting us loose on the spreadsheet, as I think Councillor Barrett put it earlier. Because I've done some calculations during the recess, and we are putting forward a budget which delivers, in which we rejected more pressures than any of the other groups and more of the proposed cuts than any of the other groups. We've proposed more spending on projects of importance to our communities and to developing the local economy than other groups. And we have, we are also the only group, I think, or we're the group with the largest proposed additional savings out of any of the groups. We're also the only group to propose putting money into the unearmarked reserve in each of the 3 years that the budget covers. And we're also the only group to reject in full that 3-year saving of £4.4 million through rationalisation of education staff, a cut which the report clearly states is likely to affect in particular children with additional support needs. And given how passionately Councillor Barrett spoke about it when moving his amendment, I would like him to invite him and his group to support the independent amendment when we come to vote later in the meeting. As a reminder, we would do all of that with the lowest increase in council tax over the 3 years of £85.48, some £200 cheaper than the Lib Dem proposal, and lower than all of the other groups as well. A different way of delivering services is possible. Our budget demonstrates that, and I commend it to the Chamber today.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor John Duff next, please.
Thank you, Provost. Can I just start by saying that I welcome the addition into the administration's budget of the funding for our Quiet Places in Schools proposal and for the funding to support the community mental health groups. Both these additions will provide much needed support for a sadly growing and vulnerable section of the community. I am disappointed that the administration chose to reject the opportunity to maintain the vital public toilet provision in Perth and Kinross. As of 31st of March this year, they are due to close, and this news will be met with horror, particularly in our rural market towns. The removal of the full adult literacy budget will have the biggest impact on asylum seekers and those whose first language is not English, making it harder for these groups to integrate into their new environment. I also note that the administration's budget has continued its previous cuts to the care and repair service, and by 2026-27 they will have removed a massive £700,000 from this service, which allows for the adaptation of people's homes. As a result, more people will remain longer in hospital, increasing our delayed discharge figures, and for others who may have to go into a care home as they are unable to remain in their own homes. The SNP's £700,000 cuts to this budget will be sorely felt by this vulnerable group of mainly elderly people and fails to match their stance on protecting the vulnerable in their budget. As has been commented, all budgets contain some good ideas, and it comes down to a matter of choices for our limited resources. And on that basis, I reiterate the fact that Perth and Kinross Council receives the 5th lowest per head of population figure for our revenue allocation. Provost, members will have the opportunity to make these choices in a few moments. I urge members to support the Conservative amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Leader of the Council.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be extremely brief, just in case Mr Mackenzie retires before we get to the capital budget, and that would be unfortunate since he's introducing it. I think we've had a good debate, and everybody's heard enough of me talking, especially at the start, and all the points have been thrashed around quite well. Some of them has had more publicity than many of the other ones. So I'm just going to say I'm content with the amended budget, and again I thank all the officers for all the work. There's far too many to mention, and I hope that strategic leads, etc., and the directors will go back and pass on the thanks to the whole chamber for the work that they did and the availability that they've given to each of the political groups. So I'm not going to talk about the actual budget motion itself, except to say that I'm content with it, and I think it is a well-rounded budget, and I'd ask you to support the SNP motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Okay, that brings us to the vote. I'm going to hand over to the clerk for the vote.
Thank you, Provost. Members, we're dealing with item 3 on the agenda, the strategic planning update and 2024-25 to 26-27 general fund revenue budget report by strategic lead finance and business support. We have a motion by Councillor Lang and Councillor Drysdale, terms of which were circulated this morning and were headed up SNP group. We had revisions to that motion after the recess from Councillor Lang. For the record, can I just ask Councillor Drysdale as the second of the motion, just to confirm he was happy with those revisions?
I suppose I better, yeah.
Thank you. We have a first amendment from Councillor Duff, seconded by Councillor Reid, that were circulated this morning, headed up Scottish Conservative and Unionist budget. A second amendment by Councillor Colin Stewart, seconded by Bailey Brock, terms of which were circulated to you and were headed up Independent Group budget. We have a third amendment by Councillor Peter Barrett, seconded by Bailey McLaren, the terms of which were also circulated and were headed Scottish Liberal Democrat Group budget. And we have a fourth amendment by Bailey, seconded by Councillor Leishman, that were also circulated and were headed up Scottish Labour Group amendment. In terms of standing orders, we shall first of all consider the third amendment against the fourth amendment. The winner of that vote will then be put against the second amendment, which will then be put against the first amendment, and finally the substantive amendment will be put against the motion. So first of all, can I ask members whether they're voting for the third amendment by Councillor Peter Barrett or the fourth amendment by Bailey? Bailey Ahern.
Abstain.
Councillor Allen.
Abstain.
Councillor Anderson.
Abstain.
Bailey.
Fourth amendment.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Third amendment.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Third amendment.
Councillor Braun.
Abstain.
Bailey Brock.
Fourth amendment. Amendment.
Was that the fourth amendment? Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Abstain.
Councillor Chan.
Abstain.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Fourth amendment.
Councillor Donaldson.
Abstain.
Councillor Drysdale.
Abstain.
Councillor Duff.
Abstain.
Councillor Forbes.
Abstain.
Councillor Frampton.
Abstain.
Councillor Freshwater.
Abstain.
Councillor Harvey.
Abstain.
Councillor Illingworth.
Abstain.
Councillor James.
Abstain.
Councillor Kogali.
Abstain.
Councillor Lang.
Abstain.
Councillor Leishman.
Fourth amendment.
Councillor McPherson.
Abstain.
Councillor Massey.
Abstain.
Councillor McCall.
Abstain.
Provost.
Fourth amendment.
Councillor McEwen. Bailey McLaren.
Third amendment.
Deputy Provost. Councillor Rebeck.
Abstain.
Councillor Reid.
Abstain.
Councillor Robertson.
Third amendment.
Councillor Shires.
Abstain.
Councillor Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Colin Stewart.
Fourth amendment.
Councillor Grant Stewart,
Abstain.
Councillor Waters,
Abstain.
Councillor Welsh,
Abstain.
and Bailey Williamson.
Abstain.
Provost, we have 4 votes for the third amendment. We have 6 votes for the fourth amendment and 30 abstentions. So the fourth amendment is therefore carried and now becomes the third amendment. So now, members, when we move on to the next stage, we're asking you to vote for either the second amendment from Councillor Colin Stewart and the third amendment from Bailey Bailey. Bailey Ahern.
Abstain.
Councillor Allen.
Abstain.
Councillor Anderson.
Abstain.
Bailey Bailey.
Third amendment.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Abstain.
Councillor Braun.
Abstain.
Bailey Brock.
Second amendment.
Councillor Carr.
Abstain.
Councillor Chan.
Abstain.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Second amendment.
Councillor Donaldson.
Abstain.
Councillor Drysdale.
Abstain.
Councillor Duff.
Abstain.
Councillor Forbes.
Abstain.
Councillor Frampton.
Abstain.
Councillor Freshwater.
Abstain.
Councillor Harvey.
Abstain.
Councillor Illingworth.
Abstain.
Councillor James.
Abstain.
Councillor Kogali.
Abstain.
Councillor Lane.
Abstain.
Councillor Leishman.
Third amendment.
Councillor McPherson.
Abstain.
Councillor Massey.
Abstain.
Councillor McCall.
Abstain.
Provost.
Second amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
I have a point of order from Bailey Bailey.
Apologies, I don't know if procedure allows us to correct this, but it seems myself and Councillor Leishman have voted for the wrong budget amendment here. We intended to say second amendment and support the independent one at this juncture, not the Liberal Democrat one. I don't know if it's possible to correct that, please. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, we intend. Sorry, okay. Sorry, could we have some clarity on what we're voting for? Sorry. Sorry, I received a message to the contrary, but thank you. Sorry for the interruption. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to continue.
Thank you, Provost. Bailey McLaren.
Abstain.
Deputy Provost. Councillor Rebeck.
Abstain.
Councillor Reid.
Abstain.
Councillor Robertson.
Abstain.
Councillor Shires.
Abstain.
Councillor Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Colin Stewart.
Second amendment.
Councillor Grant Stewart.
Abstain.
Councillor Waters.
Abstain.
Councillor Welsh.
Abstain.
And Bailey Williamson.
Abstain.
Provost, we have 4 votes for the second amendment. We have 2 votes for the third amendment, and we have 34 abstentions. So therefore, the second amendment is carried. We will now move to consider the first amendment against the second amendment. So if members can now confirm whether they're voting for the first amendment by Councillor Duff or the second amendment by Councillor Colin Stewart. Bailey Ahern.
First amendment.
Councillor Allen.
First amendment.
Councillor Anderson.
First amendment.
Bailey Bailey.
Second amendment by Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Bailey Bailey. Councillor Liz Barrett,
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Barrett,
Abstain.
Councillor Braun,
First Amendment.
Bailey Brock,
Second Amendment.
Councillor Carr,
Abstain.
Councillor Chan,
First Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert,
Second Amendment.
Councillor Donaldson,
Abstain.
Councillor Drysdale,
Abstain.
Councillor Duff,
First Amendment.
Councillor Forbes,
First Amendment.
Councillor Frampton,
Abstain.
Councillor Freshwater,
First Amendment.
Councillor Harvey,
Abstain.
Councillor Illingworth,
First Amendment.
Councillor James,
First Amendment.
Councillor Kogali,
First Amendment.
Councillor Lang,
Abstain.
Councillor Leishman,
Second Amendment.
Councillor McPherson,
Abstain.
Councillor Massey,
Abstain.
Councillor McCall,
Abstain.
Provost,
Second Amendment.
Councillor McEwen, Bailey McLaren,
Abstain.
Deputy Provost, Councillor Rebeck,
Abstain.
Councillor Reid,
First Amendment.
Councillor Robertson,
Abstain.
Councillor Shires,
First Amendment.
Councillor Smith,
First Amendment.
Councillor Colin Stewart,
Second Amendment.
Councillor Grant Stewart,
Abstain.
Councillor Waters,
Abstain.
Councillor Welsh,
Abstain.
and Bailey Williamson.
Abstain.
Provost, we have 14 votes for the First Amendment, we have 6 votes for the Second Amendment and 20 abstentions. So the First Amendment is carried. The First Amendment now becomes the substantive amendment and will be put against the motion. So finally, members, can I ask you to now vote for the motion by Councillor Lang or the amendment by Councillor Duff? Bailey Ahern.
Amendment.
Councillor Allen.
Amendment.
Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Bailey Bailey.
Motion.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Abstain.
Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Bailey Brock.
Motion.
Councillor Carr.
Motion.
Councillor Chan.
Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson.
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Duff.
Amendment.
Councillor Forbes.
Amendment.
Councillor Frampton.
Motion.
Councillor Freshwater.
Amendment.
Councillor Harvey.
Motion.
Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Kogali.
Amendment.
Councillor Lang.
Motion.
Councillor Leishman.
Motion.
Councillor McPherson.
Motion.
Councillor Massey. Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Provost.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Motion.
Bailey McLaren.
Abstain.
Deputy Provost. Councillor Rebeck.
Motion.
Councillor Reid.
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson.
Abstain.
Councillor Shires.
Amendment.
Councillor Smith.
Amendment.
Councillor Colin Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Grant Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Motion.
Councillor Welsh.
Motion.
Bailey Williamson.
Motion.
Provost, we have 23 votes for the motion, we have 13 votes for the amendment and 4 abstentions, so the motion is therefore carried.
We will just double check the count.
Provost, apologies, you're correct. So yes, 2214.
Okay, thank you. Members will now have a 5 minutes comfort break because I think we're going to get through the next item quickly, and I wouldn't normally break apart the fact we've been sitting here for nearly 2 hours. So 5 minutes, Councillor Forbes, 25-2. Let's take our seats, members. There's a couple of members who will be coming back shortly, I'm hoping. We will begin item 4, which is the strategic investment and capital budget update. And this will be presented initially by the Chief Executive and then by Mr. Mackenzie, the Head of Finance.
Provost, all the comments I made this morning about the principles apply again, and I'll make no further comments at this stage. I'll hand over to Mr. Mackenzie.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Chief Executive, and good afternoon, councillors. And I'll begin by offering my thanks to colleagues who have supported the review of the Council's capital budget and the associated capital funding strategy, and to members for their attendance at the capital budget briefing sessions. In January, the Council approved the Corporate Asset Management Framework, the Transformation Review of Leisure Assets, and the review of the Council's learning estate. This support builds on the strategic direction set by Council in January and asks members to approve setting a 6-year capital delivery programme for financial years 2024-25 to 2029-30. Section 4 of the report notes the significant work which has been undertaken in developing strategies and long-term asset management plans with the Council's community green space, fleet, information and communication technology, property and roads assets. The projected investment requirement in these assets, based on life cycle planning, is estimated at approximately £2.6 billion over the period to 2053-54. Consequently, the Officer recommendations within this report are largely focused on maintaining. Apologies, are we all? Okay, thank you. Focused on maintaining investment in the Council's existing infrastructure and assets. The Council has also approved establishing a strategic investment advisory group chaired by the Council leader to support future Council and committee consideration of capital investment in line with agreed priorities. Section 5 notes the recent transformation review of leisure assets and the remit to officers to bring back a revised scope for consolidated leisure facility in Perth. In accordance with a previous decision of Council, £90 million has provisionally been allocated within the capital funding strategy for the review of leisure assets. Section 6 notes the review of a learning estate and the remit to commence engagement with stakeholders on the secondary school estate in Perth. The Council's Scottish Government capital grant funding in 2024-25 is set out in Section 7 and Table 2 of the report. In line with the national position, general capital grant is approximately £1.2 million lower than originally estimated. The Council's funding for priority flood schemes has, however, been uplifted by £11.4 million in 2024-25 and a further £5.9 million in later years, based upon revised cost estimates for these schemes. This is considered in more detail in Section 10.4 and Table 5 of the report. Officers have undertaken a review of the current approved general fund capital budget, attached at Appendix 1, as a starting point for the development of recommendations. There are no proposed adjustments, and Council is asked to approve setting a 6-year capital delivery programme for 2024-25 to 2029-30, based on updating the current budget. All the recommendations in the report are therefore either already funded within or are in addition to the expenditure detailed in Appendix 1. Section 9 sets out officer recommendations on continuing investment in the Council's existing infrastructure and assets through the capital programmes. As detailed in Table 4, these total £33.5 million in 28-29 and £30.5 million in 29-30. In addition, it is proposed to invest £3.37 million in both years on the Council's prudential borrowing programmes. Officer recommendations on capital projects are detailed in section 10 and table 6 of the report and total £28.4 million over the period to 29/30. Recommendations are based upon assessed need and have been restricted to projects where the council either has an obligation to incur expenditure or where the project relates to the replacement or upgrade of assets critical to service delivery. And appendices 2 and 3 provide further information on the Buffer Park Link Road and IT licensing and infrastructure projects. Section 11 in Appendix 4 to the report notes the previous approval by Council of £10 million towards the cost of enabling works for the Perth West project. The funding strategy assumes developer contributions of £13 million towards infrastructure costs over the longer term. As council officers are currently in negotiation with the landowner, it is proposed to bring an update report to committee in June to confirm funding. As set out in section 12, officers have undertaken a review of the overall affordability of the general fund capital budget. Officer recommendations on additional capital expenditure within the report total £99 million, of which £70 million relates to investment in the council's existing infrastructure and assets through the capital programme. Assuming all the recommendations are approved, gross expenditure on the general fund capital budget will total £556.3 million at current prices over the 6 years to 2029/30. Most of this expenditure is, however, already reflected in the existing capital budget, with a number of significant projects currently under construction, including Destiny Bridge, Perth High School replacement, and Blairgowrie Recreation Centre. As members have previously been advised, around 80% of the Council's general fund capital budget is financed through borrowing, and the cost of borrowing has increased significantly. Table 8 in the report outlines the assumed funding of the general fund capital budget, with additional borrowing of £428 million required over the next 6 financial years to fund the proposed budget. Including the borrowing requirement for the housing programme, the Council is currently forecast to have approximately £1.115 billion of outstanding debt with the Public Works Loans Board by the end of financial year 2029/30. Officers have therefore recommended ring fencing 1% of future council tax increases from 2025/26 onwards towards supporting the capital budget within the separate revenue budget report approved earlier by council, and I would acknowledge the support of all groups for this recommendation. And as Councillor Lane alluded to, I'm about to retire and I consider my work here to be done. So thank you for that, and my retirement will be slightly more relaxed because of your approval of that recommendation. But just to conclude, as members will appreciate, the development and adherence to a robust capital financing strategy is critical to the sustainability of the Council's capital investment, both now and in the future. Happy with colleagues to take questions. Provis.
Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie, and your retirement hasn't begun just yet. We might have some questions for you. So, members, are there any questions for Mr. Mackenzie? Councillor Donaldson, we would not want to have ended this without some questions from yourself.
Indeed. I think it is the last question I'm going to be asking Stuart Mackenzie. There's been some difficult ones at times over the years, but I'm so grateful for what he's done. But I think others will make comments in a little while. Can I turn to the flood schemes, because it's a matter I've gone on about persistently over the last certainly 6 years. You might want to say something in South Kinross and that matters, but specifically on Comrie, are we now almost in the point that there are no further obstacles to be overcome, and that it may be that actual work, we've done some of the advanced works, may commence this spring, early summer? Or am I being perhaps too optimistic?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I'd almost be disappointed if you didn't ask me something. My colleague Fraser Croft, I think, is perhaps better positioned to answer. Fraser?
Thank you, Stuart. My understanding is that the contract arrangements with Balfour Beatty are still being discussed at the moment, but looking to make progress on that towards the tail end of summer and into the latter part of the year. Thank you. What is that?
So there's a few months yet to go, Fraser.
Yes.
Okay, it's we're getting there, but thank you, Fraser, and thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Councillor Ford.
Thanks, Provost. I was just interested to note that Greg Fraser's changed his name to Greg Boland on the screen. I'm sure Greg's delighted about that. My question's quite general, Stuart, and I hope it's appropriate. So if you bear with me, I normally go straight to a question, but I'm going to be a bit of preamble this time. The Scottish Government yesterday, I think, announced 200 million cuts to housing. So that will cut the affordable housing element of that. Has any work been done by officers to think about where that may lead? So, for example, if then developers don't go ahead and build the housing projects that they're going to build, we may end up not getting things like the contribution towards education and roads and transport. Is your feeling that's likely, or have you done any work in that regard? Appreciate the announcement was only made in the last couple of days.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. I think just the recent nature of the announcement means that perhaps some of that initial thinking hasn't been done yet, but I don't know if colleagues would wish to comment further. It's certainly not something which was obviously reflected in the report.
I think that's something that officers can follow up with you once they've had time to consider the matter in detail. Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. My question centres around paragraph 10.3 around the £13.2 million cost of the BPLR, or I guess the even newer Kingsway. It mentions here that we need to spend this money, and then under the conditions of the Section 75, the developer will make a capital contribution. Could someone confirm what the size of that money will be that we will get back from the developer after we've built this? So it's costing us 13.2 million, but paragraph 10.3.3 doesn't specify how much we then get back from Bertha Park Limited, and when will we get that money? Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. I don't have that information to hand. To be frank, we can source that for you. The recovery of contributions will be based on the build out rate, so that's more difficult. But we'll provide some information for elected members.
I believe Greg Boland may have turned into David Littlejohn and may be available. Okay, we will we'll provide a technical briefing note on that. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, my question relates to the sustainability question. I think you're aware that I'm concerned about just how sustainable this investment, taking us up to £1.115 billion is. In terms of what we're doing at the moment, my understanding is that the money we borrowed from the PWLB originally has now been used, and we're now looking at putting our money on spot until at spot rates until we get to a point where the PWLB becomes attractive, if you like. Do we have a percentage or a figure at which point we will move to the PWLB? And do we have an idea roughly how much that's going to cost us in the short term until that happens? Because obviously that's got to be funded from the revenue account.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. Council are going to be presented with the Treasury strategy report, which will consider these issues next week at full council. But essentially, what we're looking at is perhaps, because PWLB borrowing rates vary depending on the length of term of the loan, but perhaps borrowing shorter term initially, and then moving to longer term borrowing, effectively rolling over with borrowing over a period of time. The actual level of borrowing a council incurs is a function of its ambitions for capital investment, and those decisions
ultimately the rest of elected members. So what we have done within the report is model what the outcome would be based on the current approved capital budget up to 26-27, which is 78% of the spend or thereabouts, around about 80% of the spend, and then the £99 million worth of additional recommendations within the report. But it really comes down to what elected members approve going forward. However, with the caveat that we are on site and under construction for a number of large projects all at the same time. And in terms of sustainability, the approval of the ring fencing of the increase, 1% of the increase in council tax, will add on a recurring and cumulative basis around about £1.1 million to our loans charges budget each year. So as long as elected members are committed to that over the longer term, and that's the key point, then the position is sustainable.
If I may come back on that. Thank you, Provost. Just to say, I would welcome a report just looking at the sustainability of this. In other words, if interest rates stay at 5% for 2 years, what's the impact of that? You know, just to get a feel for just how vulnerable we are. I don't really want to come back and having to do another budget like this one because the interest rates have stayed the same. So it's trying to work out just exactly how sustainable what we're proposing is. Thank you.
I believe we now do have David Littlejohn. So Bailey, would you like to need to re-ask your question, and then Mr. Littlejohn can provide you with an answer? Thank you.
Thank you for indulging me. The question, in short, Mr. Littlejohn, was the report in paragraph 10.3 refers to the 13.2 million cost of constructing the Bertha Park Link Road. How much of that will we get back to the developer, and when will we get that back from the developer? Thank you.
The developer contribution total is around £12 million, and that's the agreed contribution, but that's based on future house completions, so it will be over a lengthy period of time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Duff.
Thank you. My question is on paragraph 10.35. Again, it's to do with the Bertha Park Link Road. So I'm just scrolling to the section myself. There's a figure in the papers with regards to the cost of constructing the Park and Choose facility, which is estimated at an additional £8.7 million, making the joint construction 21.9 million. If it is built separately from the Bertha Park Link Road, do we have an idea of how much extra it will cost to do it as a separate construction project? Thank you.
Mr. Littlejohn, are you still available?
Yes, there will be some additional costs, but not necessarily significant. Clearly, there's an economy of scale in letting a single contract. So if you imagine that the road's completed without the park and ride, there will be some disruption if it's constructed at a future date, but not necessarily a significantly more cost. What the actual number is, I can't tell you, but it's possibly in the kind of hundreds of thousands rather than, for example, millions. It's more the disruption that I think is the issue.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other requests for questions, and therefore I'll invite the Leader of the Council to move on. Well, Leader of Council, you're coming next anyway, but point of clarification.
My understanding that figure was for a separate build. It was not, and the question was asked about the scale. So that was the total if we didn't do it all at one time. So I think Mr. Littlejohn will maybe be able to come back on that. That should have been the total cost. And the design phase is already being progressed at the moment.
Okay, Mr. Littlejohn, do you have anything further to add to that?
No, I think the higher figure is the total cost of doing it. I think the question was if we just did the road and then came back later to do the parking ride separately, would there be an additional cost? So the parking ride is costed separately. I think the point I was trying to make is, as best we can estimate at this time, it's more a point of disruption. And there may be some additional cost because we're not doing a single contract, but the figures that you have in front of you are the best estimates we have at this time for the cost.
Okay, thank you. I have an additional question from Councillor Colin Stewart before I bring in a motion.
Thanks. So just maybe following up from Bailey's question, but just to be clear, in what year are we making budget provision of £13.2 million for the Bertha Park Link Road project?
I mean, it's perhaps a question for Stuart and Mackenzie as much as me, but the scheme is not yet progressed. So there's a period of technical feasibility and design to be undertaken. So there's a cost to be incurred to get us to the point of having a fully designed and specified scheme. So I suppose starting from now, that's going to take probably the best part of this year. So the significant part of that capital expenditure would be in the following, towards the end of this financial year and into next financial year. Sorry, into the 24-25 financial year and into the subsequent financial year.
But so therefore we would be committing the capital budget before we had substantial income from the receipts from the developer contribution.
Yes, because those receipts would be gathered over perhaps, well, it's hard to say, 15, 20 years.
Okay, thanks, that's clear. And then just to be absolutely clear, if we don't construct the Bertha Park Link Road, but the developer has streets coming off it, won't they still just have to build a road there?
The legal obligation is now with the council to build the road. The way that legal agreement was constructed allowed the council to exercise a right not to build the road themselves, and they have now done that. They've taken up and exercised that right. So the obligation is with the council to build the road on the basis that those developer contributions will be gathered.
Okay, and I'm sorry to follow this up again, but so is it when you said it was an obligation on the council to build the road, but it's an option here in the paper to commit capital budget to it, do we have the option to choose not to build the road?
I don't. Well, I need to seek legal input. I don't have the Section 75 agreement in front of me. It's my understanding the road is required to serve the development and to complete the Perth Transport Future project. If the council chose not to build the road, that development would essentially halt, and I would imagine the council might be at risk of action against it, because the Section 75, without having it in front of me, the wording is quite clear that the developer has the option not to build the road themselves and to transfer that obligation to the council in return for the cash payment. So I think legally it would be very difficult not for the council not to build the road. I think the issue is more about the timing. The council could choose when to build the road.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Councillor Lane, you have a question.
A question. The question would be, have we not already started collecting the developer contributions? Because I think I don't know how many houses are built, so that would obviously fund in the interim. The Section 75 agreement Dr. Head of Legal can maybe keep me correct here, was signed, I think, in 2016-17, saying that at a trigger point, the developer would build the road because it was part of Section 75, but it was also said the developer could choose not to, and it would become incumbent on the council to do the road. So we've already started collecting developer contributions. That's my question, or not. Is it 12 million, which that we will be collecting over time with developer contributions, but we'll not collect them unless we build the road? Can somebody answer that, please?
We are in gathering developer contributions because there's a set number of houses could be built in advance of the road being required, because there already is an access of the existing roundabout. It's a fairly complex situation in that those developer contributions are actually being used to offset, the initial developer contributions are being used to offset costs that the council would otherwise have had to incur. So there are mineral rights and the land that the Bertha Park High School is sited on. So rather than pay cash, the council is netting that cost off of the developer contributions. So they're being gathered, but they're being offset against these costs. So at this stage, they're not being put towards the cost of the link road itself. But the calculations that have been done have shown that offsetting to deal with the mineral rights and the land cost for the high school will even itself out. I think at a point in time, I don't have the figure in front of me, and thereafter future developer contributions would be coming in towards the actual cost of the road itself. So we're still getting in total £12 million worth of developer contributions over a lengthy period of time.
Can I come back on that just
Yes,
for
you may.
clarity so we can go on? So talking about offsetting and that, etc., would be things that the council would have had to pay for before now. We've not had to pay them before now because we've used developer contributions for the road. So it saved us money previously, but now we're incumbent. So we've actually collected money, which in reality, because it's been offset, was for this road. So I think it's a complicated issue, and we'll have to maybe take it offline to get more detail to it, because it's not coming across as very clear here.
And I think just to add, there is an elected member briefing note on the Bertha Park Link Road sets out the full story with the various kind of developer contributions, and the purpose that they're being gathered for is all set out in that note. Okay,
Thank you. Perhaps we can recirculate that to members, and if they have further questions, then that could maybe be set up as a elected member briefing. Councillor Welch, please.
Yes, it's a linked question, but and it may come out in the briefing note. But it's just in terms of effectively, are we trying to make full cost recovery via the developer contributions, and are those over that lengthy period that was quoted, for example, index linked?
No, but they should have been.
I'm sorry, Mr. Leader, that was the question for you, actually. Mr. Littlejohn, do you wish to provide any further answer?
That is correct. Those developer contributions for the link road are not index linked. The sum that was agreed at, I think, in the round is clearly short of the current estimated cost of the road. So in that respect, the Leader of the Council is correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Provost. I just wondered if we could get some idea of what is the consequence of following the recommendations of the report to delay construction of the park and ride part of this project. Does it mean that it would be shifted 5 years down the line, 2 years down the line, or what? Obviously, the park and ride facilities, something I'm keenly interested, given that it affects the Dundee Road corridor and active travel and safe travel on there. And we've heard from Mr. Littlejohn that the financial impact is minimal, maybe a few £100,000, but I think people would like to know what the impact on construction would be.
Not sure if I understood the question. So there's limited impact on cost. There's some disruption, some impact on disruption. You're going back again to to do kind of capital works in the area. I guess the timing of the park and ride or the park and choose is absolutely a choice for elected members. To do it at some point in the future or not to do it at all is a choice. I think in the greater circulation of traffic in and around Perth, and given our expected increase in housing in that area and some employment in that area, it is officers' recommendation to do the park and ride. But in terms of funding it and the timing of that is absolutely a choice for members.
Thank you, Mr. Littlejohn, and presumably one that will be picked up by the new Strategic Investment Advisory Group when it is formed. I'm now going to invite the Leader of the Council to move his motion again.
Thanks, Provost. Financial challenges that surrounded the discussions we have just had on the revenue budget naturally impact on the capital budget. Even after taking several difficult decisions last year to refine the capital programme, this chamber has had to consider the impact that the rising costs for goods and services have had on our capital projects again and again since then. It has been a key factor of the asset management framework, the review of leisure assets and plans for our learning estate, all of which we discussed the last time we met. We don't have to look far to see why the decisions we make in the capital budget are so important. In just a few weeks, the doors will open to Perth Museum, the new home to the Stone of Destiny, and a fantastic example of what we can achieve for the area. I'm particularly looking forward to seeing the opening exhibition, Unicorn, which will celebrate the story of Scotland's national animal. The new Perth High School is continuing to take shape, and work has begun at Blair Gowrie Recreation Centre, which I'm looking forward to visiting in the next few weeks with many of the other elected members. These are all projects which were debated and backed through previous capital budget reports, projects which are now becoming a reality. Focusing on the long term isn't just about high-profile new or replacement buildings. It's also about considering the needs of ageing infrastructure and creating the circumstances in which we can transform the way the council works. That's why I'm pleased to see that the recommendations put forward in this report have all been based on assessed need and where there is either an obligation to incur the spend or it is required to urgently replace or upgrade assets which are critical to service delivery. It's also why the decision we have just made to the revenue budget to ring-fence 1% from all future council tax increases to support the capital budget is so important, as it helps to give confidence in the sustainability of our programme and ensures that we can continue to plan for the future. By approving the recommendations put before us today and building on the funding confirmed in the revenue budget, our administration is backing the continued focus on delivering approved flood schemes, acknowledging the support the Scottish Government is providing towards this. We're also committing £300,000 of funding to support a further year of the successful Adapt Your Property initiative to bring empty commercial spaces back into use. And to ensure that the best use is also made of buildings, we are investing £200,000 to support community asset transfers. This will support delivery of the commitment made in the Leisure Assets Review to help give communities the practical support which will enable them to develop and adopt assets in their area. It will then be for council officers to help make this a reality. Further to the £50,000 committed to in the revenue budget, we are also applying a further £25,000 to support increased community access to campuses. We are also backing the importance of ensuring licensing and infrastructure remains in place to deliver our digital strategy and the associated improvements to customer access for those who can self-serve. The new Bertha Park Link Road is an important element of bringing together the developments at that end of Perth with the overall road network, and we are pleased to support the continued commitment to this with agreed contribution from the developers. And while there are no specific asks to take forward the delivery of Perth West today, I look forward to seeing progress on this with officers when they come back to Finance and Resources in June, so that we can consider what is required to deliver the next stage of this project. The administration's capital budget reflects the circumstances which we face. It acknowledges but looks past short-term concerns to focus on long-term sustainability and essential areas of spend. The additional capital budget, which I think can be put on the screen, it's been circulated. You will be able to see. So that's adapt your property. I've already mentioned 300,000. The community asset transfer funding, extra funding of 75,000, and community campus access funding of 25,000. That will be funded from a capital receipt, which I'm reliably informed in account speak is a gob of money from an asset that was sold. Thank you. Happy to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Mr. Deputy Leader to second.
Provost, all around us at all levels of government and in other public sector bodies, we see delays in the delivery of capital projects due to the economic situation across the UK. And of course, Perth and Kinross is not immune from these challenges, but we are in the fortunate position of being able to continue to invest in and develop projects which will support our priorities, including the flood schemes, community asset investment, and support to make better use of our community campuses, as highlighted by the leader. It's equally, if not more important, that we also look after our existing assets to the best of our abilities. Earlier today, we announced that we would reject proposed cuts in reactive maintenance of our road network, repairing potholes, in other words. However, we want to go further, and I'm very pleased to announce that in the coming months, we plan to trial an all-in-one pass machine that is expected to be able to substantially increase our capacity to repair damaged roads. As has already been said today, we need hard evidence before we spend public money, so we shall await the outcome of this 6-week trial before making any final decisions. However, we really hope this technological marvel is the game changer we expect it to be. If so, this council intends to acquire this machine on its own, if not through Tayside contracts, so that we can look towards a future with more rapid reactive maintenance of our road network. Planning for future investment will also be supported by the establishment of the new all-party strategic investment advisory group agreed earlier this year. This is an important step to ensuring that elected members and officers can collaborate throughout the year to ensure that the long-term needs of our residents and delivery of our priorities are part of the investment recommendations from the start. Provost, finally, I want to just take time to add my own thanks to Stuart Mackenzie, our outgoing Head of Finance, as he is about to retire, as well as to Scott Walker and the whole of the finance team for their tremendous support throughout the year and throughout this budget process. I'm very happy to second, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Are there any other amendments? Sorry, point of clarification, Peter Barrett, yes.
Thanks, Provost. appreciate it's been a long day and our brains may not be as alert as maybe at the start of proceedings. In our budget, we put forward, in our revenue budget, we put forward finances towards adapt your property and community asset transfer. So I'm sort of struggling to see how these two items are relevant to the capital budget. If there was a receipt that the council sold and had money for, then presumably that money is sitting in the unallocated reserves and should have been dealt with in revenue. So I don't really understand how these first two items suddenly become part of a capital budget motion. So I don't know if we can get some clarification as to whether the amendment is competent or not.
My understanding is that the motion is competent because it was from capital receipts and therefore it's being spent on capital items, but the head of finance or indeed the strategic lead could provide further clarity on that.
Thank you, Provost. That is my understanding, and the motion is competent.
Okay, thank you. Bailey Ahern, you have a point of clarification as well.
Thank you. Yeah, just want to point clarity from what the leader was saying in his remarks there. He mentioned about the community asset transfer when he was talking about 200,000, and then in their motion it's 75,000. Can I just get where the 200,000 came from? Because I don't see it in their revenue budget either.
Mr. Leader, do you wish to provide clarification?
Total of all community asset transfer monies that have been allocated across the revenue and the capital budget.
He's added it all up together from revenue and capital, and that's the total that's being spent by the council on the community asset transfers board.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. There being no other amendments, are there any comments? If there are no comments, are we all agreed? Thank you very much, members. Thank you very much for your patience through today, and it has been a collaborative meeting.